Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everyone, welcome. Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 59 to 65 will be covered today. Human freedom, the issue of halal and haram. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is a query or question. Recap verses 54 to 58. If we remember, we had a few sessions on these verses, particularly on verse 57. And I'll go through a few points. Since our deeds leave an impact on ourselves, hence whatever material associations we have in this life, these are of no benefit for the life of the hereafter. We need to focus on the kind of self which we have while living our earthly life. Coming to terms with this fact that everything in the universe belongs to Allah, and then understanding the functioning of the outer world and our inner psyche, helps to gradually come to grips with the reality of our existence as human beings possessing the trait of choice and intent. Next is life and death in every form follows the laws of Allah, and we need to look for explanations both in the physical world and in the world of our psyche. The fact that we are physically mortal means that our existence in this world is finite, and the law of requital is applicable to every facet of human existence. The Quran is for the whole of mankind, and those who accept its guidance ascend a different plane of existence by virtue of Iman. And as a consequence, they gain access to its value system. Understanding this value system helps us to perceive the psychology behind cognitive dissonances, and then by using the Quran, these can be addressed over a period of time. As we discussed previously, and more of this will be discussed as we go along through the Quran, that these dissonances are the ones which can hold us back in our understanding of the Quran. And these have to be eliminated. And the Quran helps us to deal with them effectively. Let us look at the first verse of today's presentation, 10:59. Designation of haram and halal helps to provide freedom to mankind. No one has the right to interfere in this. Qul araytum ma anzalallahu lakum min rizqin faja'altum minhu haraman wa halalan qul lallahu azina lakum am alallahi taftarun. Ask them, have you ever pondered on this, that the means of rizq which Allah has produced for you, you take it upon yourselves to declare according to your own beliefs, some of these as halal, some haram. Ask them, has Allah given you permission to do this, that you begin to make decisions about what is haram and halal yourselves? And haram and halal, as we know, haram is something which is forbidden and halal is something which is permitted. The truth is this, that you formulate some decisions from your own side, and then by assigning them with the name of Shariat, relate these to Allah. This is an immense concocted lie. Now, defining the boundary of the human freedom. Because anything which is permitted and is forbidden is defining the functioning domain of the world and as human beings. So it is important that when we are living our life, we should exactly know what is good for us and what is not good for us, so that we precisely can tailor our life according to those boundaries. In this verse, the Quran has drawn our attention to the issue of not transgressing the limits defined by Allah. These limits, requisite for optimum freedom as human beings, are clearly defined in the Quran with a view to channeling our potentials towards the development of the self, which can then help in the establishment of the system of Deen. Second is, to live a collective life, we need some defined boundaries. Because we have to interact with each other, we have to utilize the means of sustenance in this life, and of course, we also have intellect and emotions. So as a consequence of that, we can develop some conflicts. The Quran has used the term haram, which is opposite of halal, for this kind of restriction. Halal means to become free after untying ropes. So that means that halal is the one which is giving us freedom, which is defining our freedom. Hence, the meaning of haram will be to stop someone from something, forbid someone, put a restriction on someone. Before moving on to the issue of halal and haram, we would like to look at the freedom provided to man at a fundamental level by Allah. The Quran makes it clear that no man has the right to compel another man to obey him or his laws. This is against being human. And we have gone through this verse 379 in which Quran says, Ma kana li basharin an yutiyahu Allahul kitaba wal hukma wal nabuwata summa yakulu lil nasi kunu ibadan li min dunillah. That no human being has the right to ask another human being to follow his laws, and even if he is given the book. So what is important is that what we are going to follow is what is given in the Quran, and that is, as the students of the Quran, we are learning. This is degrading at the level of the human self, as each one of us possesses intrinsic respect and dignity. Walakat karamna bani Adam, and Quran has said that every child, Bani Adam, every child of Adam has got an inherent, intrinsic value and has respect and dignity, and that cannot be violated. So any system which violates that basic respect and dignity is not for human beings. That will curtail their freedom. Next is details laid down by the Quran. For this reason, Allah provided the Quran as a guidance to manage human affairs as part of the system of Deen with the Momineen who are fully committed to the permanent values, managing its affairs on behalf of Allah. Obedience within this system will always be the commands of Allah, and the Islamic system will be just an agency delivering it on behalf of Allah. See, Quran makes our job very easy because it takes away the lawmaking issue, the legislation, from the hands of human beings and puts us on a pedestal of equality. And that is important. And as we know that, as we understand this system, we see that it is for our own benefit. Because the more burdens we carry, the slower we will become, and our self will not develop on those lines in which the self has to become eligible for a better life here, which is free from fear and huzn, and also becomes eligible for the life of the hereafter. The first principle stated by the Quran is that everything of the pleasant means of rizq is halal, except that which Allah has declared haram. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum washkuru. O Momineen, whatever is given to you as rizq, eat pleasant things from it and display shukr. And we'll come to shukr slightly later. In relation to, for example, edible things, it is stated in 5.3 that haram is dead meat, blood, and it's related to flowing blood, flesh of pig, and that on which has been invoked the name of other than Allah. So these are the things which Quran has very categorically defined to be haram. After that, there are some details of animals which have died, for example, by strangling, by a fall, etc. We can go through the rest of the verse. After stating this, the Quran has declared that this day Deen has come to its completion. After defining these haram things, then the Quran says, Al-Yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum. And that is important for us to understand that it is in the context of the system of Deen. Next is the issue of halal and haram needs to be viewed in terms of human freedom. In relation to some of these prohibitions, we need to bear in mind that Allah has given us maximum freedom and no one has the right to add anything to this list which is mentioned in the Quran. And that is something which we should keep it in mind, that if any human being adds another thing into these prohibitions and says this is also haram, then that means they are transgressing. And if they transgress, one may say that it will not make any effect, any effect. Well, if we add few more things to this haram, actually it is a very serious crime against humanity and in the book of Allah, and we will see that. If someone does this, then they are essentially transgressing the commands of Allah, and which is a very severe crime. We can figure out from this the seriousness of curtailing human freedom. As a consequence, those who resort to this can never benefit from the Quranic guidance. And that is an important point, because these things contaminate our thinking. If these contaminate our intellect, our ability to understand the Quran is diminished. Because if our mind is contaminated, then forget about Deen. We can never ever be able to understand the Deen. And if we don't understand the Deen, we will never get Allah's help in this regard. So it is very serious. Even in these prohibitions, since these are related to food, the exception is noted by the Quran that in case of any threat to life, these can also be consumed by force of necessity without willful disobedience nor transgressing due limits. That means even in these prohibitions, Quran has made an exception that if, for example, if you are dying of hunger, you desperately need it, then you should eat it because your own physical life is very important. Because if physical life is not there, then we cease to exist. So that is important, but we should not go beyond limits. For example, if one of these haram things we are eating and we like the taste, we start transgressing the limit. And we should keep it in mind that Allah knows our intentions, and our intentions are the ones which are going to affect ourselves. Another point which we need to bear in mind is that the Quranic commands are within the system of Deen and are addressed to Jamaat-e Momineen, because the verse starts from Ya ayyuhallazina amanu. Without the system of Deen, insistence on following these commands may provide us with a false sense of self-satisfaction that we are following the Quran. And as a consequence, we do not then strive any further on the path of Allah. And this is happening around us, that we have picked and chose whatever suits us on individual basis and never ever think of the system of Deen. This selected so-called obedience of some of the commands which are meant for the system of Deen is preventing our minds from looking at the serious issues present in the world to which Allah is directing our attention, for example, tyranny and exploitation. So pick and choose is a crime in the book of Allah. And that is something which we must keep it in mind. Imposing anything as haram, which is not given in the Quran, is to restrict the freedom of people for all times, and those who do so are committing a crime against Allah as per the Quran. One verse sums up the basis of the issue of halal and haram. And over here, this is the verse from Surah Araf, and I'll go through the meanings. O Rasool, ask them who it is that has forbidden those things of adornment and attraction and pleasant edible things as haram, which Allah has produced for the use of His servants. These things are equally available to Momineen and others in the life of the world, and according to our physical law, whoever wishes can acquire these. So Quran over here said that who has forbidden these? Qul man harrama zinatallahi allati akhraja li ibadihi wal tayyibati min ar-rizqi. See, nothing is left. So that means with those exceptions which he's already noted, everything is halal. And why it is halal? Because Allah does not want to curtail our freedom. If He wanted to make all these additional things haram as well, He would have said it. And that is the point which Quran is trying to make, that we do not want, Allah does not want our freedom is curtailed. At this time, they have to face great hardships in order to acquire these, but in the new revolutionary era of life, these will be available without any grief and hardship. In this way, we make our laws clear to those people who make use of their intellect and reason and use their knowledge and understanding. Just see, كَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. Now, next is, I have quoted another verse from Surah Al-Ma'idah. The Quran has catered for all aspects without affecting human freedom. What Quran is saying over here is, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tasalu an ashiya'a min tubdalakum tasukum wa in tasalu anha hina yunazzalul Quranu tubdalakum afallahu anha wallahu ghafurun alim. By describing tayyib and khabith paths, we have noted universal principles, and that is the verse before it. It will be instructive to go through that verse as well. Not given their details. In light of these universal principles, you can figure out yourselves which tasks fall within the category of tayyib and which are within khabith. The principles of life are immutable, and the shape in which these principles operate keep on altering. Those are what are known as subclasses and details of these principles. So Quran says that it has given us the principles and permanent values, and we have to figure out the subclasses according to the era in which we are living. In the Quran, we have generally noted principles, not their subclasses, bar a few. In some cases, Quran has also gone into further details. Hence, do not persistently inquire about those matters whose details we have not noted, because if we also define their details, then those will also become immutable, and when these will not meet the needs of the time, then following them will become very hard for you, and consequently, those details will lead to discomfiture for you. And it is evident that while the process of wahi is ongoing, these matters will be made plain to you on your insistence. So what Quran is saying over here is that whatever is required to be revealed has been revealed. And this was stated to Momineen right at the time when the Quran was being revealed. In any event, be particularly vigilant regarding this. Whatever has occurred before this, we are overlooking it. Be careful from now. In the law of Allah, there is provision for forgiveness for previous errors and tolerance for minor mistakes. Haram has wider connotation in the context of Deen as a system. Another aspect in relation to haram is noted in 733. Quran says, "Qul innama harrama rabbil fawahisha ma zahara minha wa ma batana wal ithma wal baghya." And this is interesting that Quran has also said the same word haram is used in case of fawahish, which are visible and invisible. And people's minds don't go there. And they are more concentrated on something which is physical. Those things are forbidden which are evil, whether visible or hidden, i.e. includes the state of our mind as well. The Quran is very precise in that if you do not forbid evil and do not promote maruf, as stated in the Quran, then your life will become hell on this earth. And over and above, if you add more haram things in this list, which we have already specified, then you will multiply the fire of the hell in which you are living. From this, it is clear that firstly, to declare something haram is the prerogative of Allah and Allah only. Second is, no one else possesses this right. Thirdly, he has not declared anything related to adornment and beauty as haram. There is nothing haram in adornment and beauty, which includes music as well. Of course, then we can make a choice that what kind of a music we wish to listen and what promotes the values, which does not promote the values. The issue before us in the light of the Quran is that we have to use our freedom and choice to decide that which path of life we wish to follow. And if everything is prescribed, then we cannot make choices. Fourthly, the things which are declared haram among rizq, which is edibles, he has noted and clarified himself. Next point is, among all that is declared halal, it is our choice whether to consume it or not. So I have a choice whether to go for a thing which is not declared haram or not, but I do not have a choice to declare it haram since I don't like it. And that is the point which Quran is making clear. For example, if we do not like a particular food, then we can avoid eating it. That is our choice. There is no sin in that. There is no crime in that. I have just used my choice. But we cannot declare it as haram just because we prefer not to eat it. Regarding the food of the people of the book, Quran says being halal, this does not mean that all kinds of food is permitted, i.e. it will be that food which is not declared haram by the Quran. There's also a condition here that they should also consider food with us to be halal. Just go through this verse. It's instructive to go through these details for our own understanding. An important point here is that we live in a non-Deen world, and Muslims of all denominations live comfortably without looking at these finer aspects of human psyche and legitimize their living by turning all these instructions of the Quran into ritualized practices, whereas the Quran is inviting us to look at these within the context of the system of Deen. And that is important, that by selecting few which suit us and rejecting the others, what are we doing with our lives? That is, that not only our own lives are in disorder, we are also not looking after yatim and miskeen of the world, to whom the Quran is repeatedly drawing our attention. Going against the values of the Quran is a recipe for disaster. وَمَا ظَنُّ الَّذِينَ يَفْتَرُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَذُو فَضْلٍ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. Those people whose state of boldness and audacity is such that they make their decisions themselves and then by relating these to Allah, implement these in the name of Deen. Ask them what is their view of the day of judgment ultimately. Do they think that they can do whatever they desire? There is no one to question them. Do they think that this conduct of theirs will continue like this for eternity and that no such revolution will arrive due to which their pattern of life will alter? The reality is that this self-deception of theirs is actually due to the law of respite of Allah, according to which the outcomes of deeds appear after a period of time. Consequently, these people think that there is no such law like the law of requital, whereas if they paid attention, then this reality would have become apparent to them that the law of respite is a special blessing that is fadl on mankind from the direction of Allah. Because due to this, there is a chance of protection before the arrival of destruction. So we should not think that if we are going through the law of respite, in fact, our life is a law of respite, this following law of respite from our birth to death. So if we have not suffered so far with the consequences of our deeds, whether individually or collectively, that does not mean that the law is not working. But the problem is that most people do not acknowledge its precise scaling. Now, 1060, doubts, suspicions, zan are dissonances created by human mind and need to be addressed. The Quran has placed repeated emphasis on the issue of human accountability and the day of judgment. It presents two realities as facts and invites us to think through the issue consciously and deliberately. Then it informs us that merely accepting its possibility intellectually is not enough. It is important to look at the consequences of not registering it cognitively, as this will lead to wasting important time in our life. Do we seriously reflect that the Quran is from Allah who owns the universe? And these are important things, that whatever is stated in the Quran, it is serious and we have to acknowledge it and absorb it and accept it through our heart and mind. Life spent under zan, which is doubt, suspicion, conjecture, is not the same as life lived in the light of Iman and the permanent values. The former is the equivalent of living in darkness, while the latter is living in light and also knowing it to be such through the signs given in the Quran. The Quran directs us to enact everything in this life and to not postpone it for the next life. Do not even try to leave it for the latter part of this life. And this is an important comment which I noted over here after thinking through it carefully, that what we should keep it in mind is not to postpone things. Because if we postpone, that means we have less time towards our death. That is, we have a less time to act when we are nearing our death. And secondly, we are not sure. We might go into some kind of a serious physical disability and fail to do more. And that is the important thing, that whatever we can do within the means available to us, then we are doing our best to the best of our ability. It presents this evidence of being al-haq through the changes which take place through the development of ourself and total transformation of our vision and outlook. Then Allah concludes the verse by stating the fact that وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ, i.e., human efforts are only multiplied in terms of their outcomes on this path guided by the Quran. Most of mankind will not follow this path as they do not make the right choices in life. What is shukr? So what I've done over here is I thought to go through this route and in slightly more detail some of the applications which are noted in Lugat al-Quran. This is the root here for shukr. The original meaning is to fill up and to express or manifestation of expression. Ibn Faris has noted different basic meanings, including something in a state of being filled and also abundance in quantity. That is, some efforts we make and as a consequence, what kind of results we are getting. Such an effort whose full outcomes appear before us just like milking a goat. Because if we are maintaining a goat very well and feeding it well, then it is going to give us good quantity of milk. Some applications, kufr has appeared as the opposite of shukr. So it is some kind of character, some behavior, some attitude towards life. And shukr means which meets the criterion of the Quran. Keeping Allah's bounties open for mankind to not hide or cover these. So it is not merely saying by through our tongue, Shukr Allah. It means to do something. It is used in relation to that animal which provides more milk even with less fodder. Very important. That is, we utilize our abilities to our maximum for the good of mankind. In relation to a person who is generous in helping others. Very important. For example, if we have employed someone and their wages are, let's say, equivalent to 10, and if we give him or her one extra, that means it will be under the display of shukr. Of course, if we can afford to give a bit extra. Giving higher recompense in return for less work, used in relation to Allah as well. For example, Allah is Shakir. Human potentials also fall under it when we develop and manifest these to their fullest extent. This occurs through salih deeds. And it's important over here that shukr means that if I have 10 potentials and I make an effort to increase those 10 to, let's say, 12, and that will also come under shukr, because and more we will explore those potentials within ourselves, the more shukr will be displaying according to what Quran is saying and telling us. The one who manifests the name of Allah develops his own self. This means to utilize these as per the law of Allah. Display of shukr in relation to nations is to work for the good of mankind as noted. Now let us go to the next verse, 1061, becoming aware of the companionship of Allah through the Quran. And I'll not go through the verse, but I'll go through the meanings. Otherwise, the state of our law of requital is such that, O Rasool, in whatever condition you may be, and no matter what part of the Quran you may be rehearsing to them, and O people, whatever task you are performing, whether you are engrossed in it so much so that you have no inkling of who is watching you, but our sight is continuously on you. And that is something which is very important, because when we are going through the Quran, that means Allah is also watching us and is a witness to it. And that means, for example, when we are sharing this presentation from the Quran, Allah is also participating in it. And to be aware of this fact is the one which strengthens ourselves. And that is an important point which is made over here. وَمَا تَكُونُوا فِي شَانٍ وَمَا تَتْلُوا مِنْهُ مِنْ قُرْآنٍ. That whatever تَتْلُوا مِنْهُ مِنْ قُرْآنٍ, whatever you are reciting, whatever you are discussing, whatever you are thinking on, Allah knows about it. And next is, there is not an atom in the earth and the heavens which is hidden from the sight of your Rabb. Anything equal in size to an atom or smaller or bigger than this, including thoughts. Just see, we only, because we are very much oriented towards physical things, we do not sometimes concentrate on our thoughts. And over here, Quran is saying smaller or bigger. And what is the size of thoughts? And thoughts are created by Allah. He has created it. So we should keep that in mind, that our thoughts are as much included in all this as much as the physical things. All remain protected within the perspicuous records of the law of requital and tablet of knowledge of Allah. So illa fi kitabim mubin, the Quran sums up in this verse, is that everything is following laws, and we should concentrate on that and think through it, that nothing escapes the law of requital. 1061, Momineen provided with reassurance by noting the finer details of the law of requital. The verse reiterates a few finer points here which provide us with reassurance that nothing escapes Allah's sight in the human world. Those who choose to be on this path are never going to be abandoned as long as they remain firmly on Surat al-Mustaqee. So there should not be any iota of doubt that Allah will not extend his help to us in case we are following the Quran as the Quran tells us. And of course, it depends on the means and resources at a particular point in time. And so there is no room for becoming despondent or hopeless. Firstly, the Quran being the book of guidance, whenever it is consulted, this means that we get in touch with Allah's word. And we can see Tatlu. And after receiving direction on any issue, we then act on it. During this whole process, we remain aware that it is being carried out in his presence. And Quran says very clearly, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. The issue is that are we aware of this fact all the time? Secondly, nothing is hidden from the knowledge of Rabb, i.e., all means of sustenance for all times are catered for by Allah for the whole of mankind. The issue is to manage its equitable distribution among mankind by meeting the criterion laid down by the Quran. Next is thirdly, since Allah has knowledge of everything right down to the tiniest particle, therefore Momineen who are taking responsibility on his behalf need to strive hard to figure out these details. Why should they do this? To ensure that all requirements of the members of society are fulfilled and all human beings are accounted for within the system's responsibility, and it's not an easy task. So when Quran says tiniest parts, it means it is drawing our attention to be aware of it when we are dealing with the system of Deen. Next is under the same verse 1061, Allah by relating to himself draws our attention to the finer aspects of our living. Fourthly, all this knowledge is meant to be explored by man in order to benefit from this. The potentials for this are kept within Adam right from the time of his creation. Malaika are committed to help Adam in his respect. By stating fi kitabim mubin, the Quran has made it clear that whatever is required by man is placed within his reach. All he has to do is desire it, then motivate himself, and through hard work he can acquire it. Next is fifthly, Momineen who emerge from among mankind need to commit to the cause of Allah, which indeed is their own cause, i.e., there lies the secret of their own eminence and loftiness in this life and the life of the hereafter. Point is that we should not be scared or fearful of this. When we have come to the Quran, then it is our duty to keep it in mind that we are doing whatever is possible within our means to promote the cause of Allah, to promote the cause of Deen. And we are never going to be alone because he's always with us. So this idea that we go back to him in the hereafter, this is against the Quran. We have to develop that level of consciousness and awareness right here in this world, where we are all the time aware that Allah is with us. This verse defines in a nutshell the importance of being human and then enhancing its value on an exponential scale by understanding the significance given to Momineen. And see how much reassurance he is giving us, for example, through this verse, that whatever you are doing, you are within our sight. We know what you are doing. We hear as well and we see as well. And that is at self level. And that is very reassuring because even living in hell, we can get the assurance that this system can be changed, that life can come out of death. From an animalistic level where he has nothing beyond his physical death, the Quran is defining the highly refined state of the self's development. Allahu waliyul lazina amanu yukhrijuhum minal zulumati ilan nur, that Allah is the companion of those who have Iman, and he brings them out of darknesses into light. And we have seen that how many darknesses we have already discovered and we have come out of it. And we now know what light means to remove these darknesses. Allah is the companion of Momineen and brings them out of darknesses into the light. After this verse, Allah sums up the status of Momineen in the next two verses. Now here come two verses, 62 and 63. Nothing is left for the hereafter. All is summed up. Now it is our choice. Allah inna awliyallahi la khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun allazina amanu wa kanu yattaqun. Remember those people who through obedience to the laws of Allah become the companions of Allah and they become awliya. For the establishment of the system of Allah, neither fear of any external power remains in them, nor anxiety from inner conflict. And if we remember, Quran says that it will help remove huzn. So that means the huzn will be through the hands of human beings. And Momineen have to recognize it. There is no separate class of these people, that is awliya. These are those people who accept Iman in the truth of the laws of Allah and live life in accordance with them, i.e. it is those who are Momineen and Muttaqeen that are called awliya. And we'll look into it slightly more detail later. Becoming Muttaqee is evidence-based. These two verses sum up the ultimate reality of human creation, its need for guidance, and the supreme companionship between man and Allah. Coming to grips with comprehending this relationship and the subsequent transformation of human outlook sets the scene for the system of Deen. What is noted in 1057 becomes elaborated here. If you remember, in 1057, Quran had addressed mankind, and then it said that Hudam wa rahmatul lil Momineen. So that is to which I'm trying to point our attention. In verses 230 to 38, Allah described the basis of the creation of Adam, and right at the outset made a few facts clear to him about his creation, i.e., possession of choice and intent. A great asset, great attribute, and this choice and intent is the one, once we look into it in finest details, then we realize our own intrinsic value. Limitations of his existence in terms of being physical, for example, finite duration of his life on the planet, weakness of his intellectual and emotive makeup, and importance of his social and communal life in the world. So Allah did not leave it there. Then he told Adam that all these weaknesses you can overcome and strengthen them. Adam is told clearly and unambiguously that he will end up creating problems of fasad and bloodshed, that is, conflicts, chaos, wars, differences, fear, grief. So if all these exist, that means we are not following the Quran. If he does not seek the guidance of Allah and does not search for a higher aim to his life, if he thinks that there is nothing more to his life other than to pursue his own hedonistic desires, and to live life assuming that it will end with death, then essentially he will create hell for himself and for others and will find nothing in the life of the hereafter. Next is journey from Adam to Momin is placed within the reach of man. Allah then provided Adam with a choice in verse 238 that guidance through wahi will arrive for him if after considering this guidance he decides to accept it rationally and then follows it. His life will take a different direction, and in this effort of his, Allah's help will become available to him in every sphere of his earthly existence. And this is something which we should keep it in mind, because we will capitalize on that, and this is something which is going to help us to understand our own significance being on this path. This guidance was sent through various messengers who, being human, served as models for others, and those people who followed the guidance willingly came together and established the system of Deen in their respective localities. Since human beings live in communities, there is a need to come together to strive on this path, and this is why the Quran has used the plural tense to highlight the importance of a collective effort. In fact, the Quran has pointed to the inner transformation which occurs by acquiring Iman, and as a consequence, individuals desire to be in the company of those who are already on this path. There will always be people on this path in the world. We need to seek them, not sit by idly. We have gone through this point previously as well, that when we acquire precisely that Iman which is given in the Quran, that desire arises within us to be with those who are on this path. And we remove our differences, become united, and then pursue this goal of ours together. Enhancing our intrinsic values as human beings through the guidance of Allah. He is made aware that his choices and decisions will manifest in the outer world, and that is addressing Adam. And if the outcomes of his deeds in the physical world create problems for others, he will need to think hard. That means if people see that they are creating problems in the world and insist on creating that, then that means they are following the path of Iblis. And as Momineen, one should be aware of that. The law of cause and effect will become evidently clear to him the moment he starts to deal with physical things to produce his sustenance from the land. By looking at the opposite view of these verses, we should think and reflect that what does it mean to live life without the benefit of the companionship of Allah? And see in these verses 1061 to 1063, Quran has first said that I'm watching you. You are in my sight, and I'm pleased that you are doing this job of going through the Quran, understanding it, and then trying to follow it. And then it says that now you have become companion of Allah. And if you have become companions of Allah, if one is not, then that means one should be able to differentiate between the two states of human mind or human psyche. the owner of the universe. Do we want to live under the umbrella of his protection, that is, he being Ghafur, and decide to accept his guidance and then join those who are determined to follow the path defined by him? It is like putting a train on a different track, which takes it to a totally different destination, i.e., the one which is free from fear and every kind of dissonance. Here, the verse 1057 becomes further expanded when it states, Ya ayyuhan nasu qad ja'atkum maw'izatum min rabbikum wa shifa'un lima fis sudur wa hudan wa rahmatul lil mu'mineen. I thought to quote it again because it is coming out of this verse that we are discussing some of the subsequent verses. And let us read this verse in verse. Reading it in reverse, Momineen desiring rahmat and guidance need to become free from their dissonances in order to do what their Rabb has wished them to do. All this is placed within the realm of possibility, even if most of mankind is not interested initially. So if we look at it from the other side, we see that Momineen, Hudam wa rahmatul lil Momineen, that is, if they want guidance and rahmat, then they have to remove all their dissonances as guided by the Quran, and then they pass it on to others, and then that is the way they create a Jamaat, which is coming out of mankind. And this is the process of following the Quran. Then is 1062-63, continuous reflection helps to find answers to questions arising in our minds. Here we need to note another important aspect, i.e., Allah has not asked us to be like this, but instead has stated that this is how Momineen will become as a consequence of following his guidance. Let us analyze it a bit further with this in mind. See, the Quran has says that they will not have khawf and huzn, which means that once you do this, have iman and start following this path, khawf and huzn will gradually be addressed, because khawf and huzn is a sort of dissonance. And this is like if I have a headache and I take paracetamol, then that paracetamol will help me to get rid of my headache. And once the headache disappears, that means paracetamol is working. And same kind of a relationship we should figure out between iman and elimination of khawf and huzn. Verses 1062-63 emphatically declare that it is a fact that for those who choose to become the companions of Allah, also go through these verses, the consequence of this will be that they will have no fear and huzn, i.e., as a recipe, this will become eliminated. The question is whether this will become removed even when the system of Deen is not yet established. Because this idea, this thought can come to our mind, what about living under the capitalist system? Will we get rid of it as well? And the question, the answer of the Quran is yes. Prior to the system of Deen, we need to understand the psyche behind this fear and grief which exists in the man-made world. The Quran helps us to deal with this aspect. Then it states that through Iman and by becoming Muttaqee, by following the guidance, it becomes clear to us that what is noted in the Quran leads to fulfillment of the promise of Allah. Because that is where the Quran proves to us that it is evidence-based. It is not otherworldly. It is not something abstract. In becoming Muttaqee lies the revelation of this fact that the system of Deen falls into the realm of human possibility. Now over here I've drawn a schematic because the journey from Amanu to Yattaqoon, I thought it is to put it down in this schematic. First is desire to acquire guidance, acquire Iman in Allah, plus the hereafter, Malaika, books and Anbiya. This will lead to inner change, go to next step. Despite intense attraction for wealth, share with fellow needy people, continue to reflect profoundly on the state of man-made systems, then recognize the need for Salat and Zakat as systems, and then we go to the next step. And this is taken from the verse 177 of Surah Al-Baqarah. We have gone through it previously as well, but over here it is presented in a schematic form to illustrate Amanu to Yattaqoon. Come to this conclusion that in order to proceed further, need to make a commitment on the path of Allah, strive with other Momineen, never to abandon the straight path of the Quran. Commitment is very important because if we are not committed to this path and there is an iota of doubt within our minds that it is not possible, I can't get Allah's help. Is it that simple? then that means we are not committed. And when we are not committed, doubts will come, zan will come, and we will not put in our best within the means available to us. And that is important to keep it in mind. And that is why it is important to stay together. Next is, having been on this path, continue with full focus of mind and heart, confront all hardships. This will help to strengthen and develop the self. More will share the same aim. As the system of Deen requires people of very highly developed intellect and emotive stability, gradually they will keep becoming Muttaqee after going through these step changes. This coming together and removal of differences will become an evidence of the Quran being al-Haq. 1064, rewards are part of Allah's Deen. Here comes another very powerful verse. Lahumul bushra fil hayati dunya wa fil akhirati la tabdila li kalimatillah zalika huwal fawzul azim. For them there are prosperities and successes of every kind in the life of this world, and also bounties and achievements in the life of the hereafter, i.e. does not mean that these people live a life of deprivation and dependency in the world and are busily trying to attain spiritual ascendancy and adorning the hereafter through distaste for and severing from material things. This is the maslak of Gnosticism, which has nothing to do with the Quranic system. So under the Quranic system, we cannot detach ourselves, dissociate ourselves from the physical world. In fact, we should be more involved into it so that we can get maximum benefits for the whole of mankind. And of course, first stage is to understand them. So science is very much part of it, and its application is very much part of it. This is the law of Allah, that both their worldly life and the life of the hereafter will be very successful and bright, and Allah's law, which is called kalimat here, words, and Allah's law never changes. This is a supreme achievement which falls into their share, i.e. prosperities of both the present and the future. And let us look at some finer details of this verse. Under man-made systems, justice is through relative values. Here Allah puts before us the glad tidings of success and prosperity right in this physical world, and decrees that what is given here as guidance from Allah has all the potentials of becoming a reality if we follow its recipe and never give up. Even the man-made system functions on the basis of reward and punishment. In this system, since the justice system is based on man-devised laws, it suffers from human emotive biases, and being based on relative values, gross injustice is done to mankind across the world. Just for comparison, I noted some of these things over here so that we keep it in mind that man-made system also works on rewards and punishment. The rewards and punishments have very little in relation to human effort and the crimes committed by people. For example, in one organization, the same person working for 8 hours gets a different reward from another one. So we can see gross injustice within the man-made system. The same applies to crime. The same crime committed in one country will have a different punishment in other countries on the planet. In fact, the different punishment will also be meted out to people in having different status. For example, somebody very rich probably maybe get away with it, and somebody who is poor might get hanged. Then the man-made system does not take into account the human self and its need for development. It is not even aware of the existence of nafs as defined by the Quran, i.e. in relation to this life and the life of the hereafter. These points are important for us to understand, because before we say that why system of Deen is not taking shape, that we have to come to grips with these problems psychologically. Rewards are part of treading on this path. Here in this verse, Allah has invited us as Momineen to stretch our imagination, knowledge, and understanding and work out the rewards and glad tidings under the system of Deen in this world. Of course, this will be on behalf of Allah. The hallmark of this will be total freedom from fear and huzn. So we should look at it as if the verse is coming from the side of Allah. But actually what Quran is telling us is that you may turn it into glad tidings for yourself. It is within it. Once you follow this path, follow this recipe, these glad tidings which Allah has promised will become a reality for you. Desire and life are intrinsically linked. When there remains no desire, then life and death become the same. Every desire has some mode of motivation behind it, and the Quran has recognized this aspect throughout and has referred to it frequently. It recognizes the challenges faced by Momineen in a world where there are no signs of the system of Deen. Next is in this verse, Allah has put it before us as a concrete reality that our efforts on this path are not going to go unrewarded. Why should these go unrewarded when we are getting rewarded as we are going along? Just see the changes which are taking place within our own psyche, the way our self is developing, the way our self is getting reassurance again and again as we go through the Quran. As these rewards are built within the endeavors we make by following the Quranic value system. For example, together with this life, by noting the life of the hereafter, the Quran has brought into the equation the development of the self. How beautifully the Quran sums up this life and the life of the hereafter, and then joins these together and says that this should become part of your cognitive makeup, and then see what changes take place within your own self. Then it has reassured us that the words of Allah do not change. Hence, we need to look for the signs and keep reassuring ourselves as we tread along this path. Since this is the path of achievements, its impact on the self is permanent and no one can take it away from us ever. Now let us go to the next verse, 1065. Words do cause hurt. However, such things should be viewed in a wider context of the Quran. This is a very important aspect which needs our careful attention, because what is going on in the world is where so-called freedom of speech is also being taken away. And it is very selectively being addressed. We have seen the case of like Julian Assange and Arshad Sharif, who was killed, and Julian Assange is now incarcerated into prison for saying something which is a fact, for speaking truth. وَلَا يَزُنْكَ قَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّ الْإِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Hence, O Rasool, do not become disheartened by the words of these opponents. What kinds of powers are they masters of that they can overpower you and defeat your deen? See how much reassurance the Quran is giving us that on this path, you're not being left alone. The truth is that all power and authority belong wholly to Allah and are acquired through obedience to His laws alone, that Allah, who is all-hearing and all-knowing. And we have seen the example of that in 1061, that He is there all the time. So He's part of, for example, this presentation. He's listening to it. So that is the way we should look at it. And it is a fact. It is not abstract. It is not arbitrary. It is a fact. The Quran helps us to strengthen ourselves by viewing opposition in the context of its value system. And I'll go through its meanings. This verse I quoted from Surah Anam. O Rasool, we are well aware of this reality that whatever things these people say about this system are a cause of great distress and anxiety for you. So Quran is recognizing that what kind of opposition we have and who are declaring, who are passing all types of negative comments. But they do not falsify you that this thing becomes hard for you. They are actually falsifying the law of Allah, though their heart acknowledges it. And this is important because if, for example, we being the students of the pure Quran for the system of Deen, if we are not following it, then we are essentially conforming to the majority. Then we will have no opposition from the majority, because majority is going in the direction of hell, and we will be part of it, and we will enjoy all the benefits of the wrong system. But the moment we stop and start opposing it and say that this is wrong, you're falling over the cliff, you're destroying your life, you're making this world uninhabitable, and also you have nothing in the hereafter, then of course they are going to retaliate. And this is a consequence of that. Hence, there is no cause to take its ill effect to heart if you say to someone that poison is fatal and he in turn states, no, it is life-giving. Then as a result of this, one can feel concerned about his ignorance, but there should be no distress and sorrow. Further along, remain vigilant about any hurt by words, expect it, and remain steadfast. There are 4 parts of this verse demanding our reflection. Firstly, in the propagation of Allah's message, there will emerge opposition of all kinds, and we need to be fully aware of this. If we follow the teaching and training of the Quran and develop ourselves from these lines, then gradually we will come to terms with the nature of this opposition and its causes. Next is, secondly, these people oppose this message because it goes against their wishes, and hence the opposition is indeed to Allah's guidance. So it is not they are not opposing us. Of course, we are representing Allah, we are His companions, so we have to take it. But we should also keep it in mind that we have a higher aim of life, and we have to take care of those yatim and miskeen and all the misery and khawf and huzn in the world. However, it is Momineen who present this message, therefore they vent their opposition against them. We are advised to learn to view it as opposition to Allah, hence the protection is, for example, if you look at this verse, وَسَلَامٌ عَلَى الْمُرْسَلِينَ. When we are passing on this message, the protection and security is part of it. If we remember when Hazrat Musa, he went to Pharaoh and he said, I have killed this man and I'm fearful that he might react. Allah said, no, I see as well as I hear. Thirdly, complete power as an entity belongs to Allah, that is to His laws, and as noted in 35:10, Quran says, Man kana yuridul izzata falillahil izzatu jamiya. Alayhi yasadu al-kalimul tayyibu wal amalu salihu yarfa'uhu. By developing this resilience and patience within ourselves, we gradually gain strength. And over here, Quran has said, we have gone through this verse previously as well. And what Quran has said, that whole of power belongs to Allah. And if all that good we do, all that is righteous we do, it rises up through our deeds. It goes up, and gradually our self develops, and it reaches a state of development where it becomes fully certain that what is being promised by the Quran is going to materialize at some point in time. Fourthly, we acquire two attributes as noted over here, as-samiul alim, keep acquiring knowledge, use perceptive power, and grow in eminence. Next is, those who oppose and resist the pure Quran only hurt their own self. There is nothing negative over here that we should be pleased that they are hurting themselves. Issue is not over here before the Quran. The issue is Quran is making us understand that this is how human psyche functions. This verse also points to the fact that Quranic Islam has sufficient tolerance built into it that people can oppose it or are ignorant and resort to all kinds of name calling, accusations, blasphemies. However, if we are on Sirat al-Mustaqim and have developed ourselves based on Iman and solid deeds and are using the signs given in the Quran to signpost our direction, then we will not be distracted by such events and incidents. The messengers and their companions of Allah were subjected to these kinds of words, but they remained firmly on their path and were never distracted or reacted violently. There was no need as Wahi guided them. And when these suspicions or doubts or zan comes at initial stages, then we had to address it by going back to the Quran and by being part of the company of Momineen. Because isolation can create such problems, particularly at initial stages. Let us look at a few examples from the Quran. Other Yusuf was called a thief by his own brothers and was also falsely accused by the woman, but he remained firmly on this path and never reacted emotively. We have gone through his model and just see that with just one aim in his mind, that he is going to get help from Allah in what he wishes to achieve within the guidance of Wahi. And he never doubted it. Even in the prison, he never doubted it. Why didn't he doubt it? Because he was absolutely clear about his Iman, in which his heart and mind both were committed. And that is a great example for each one of us, but of course we have more examples. The messenger Lut was verbally accused and threatened by his people. He did not react. Next is Rasulullah was called names, but he ignored all these and pursued his path with his companions. He had to even hide in a cave and express the strength of his Iman by stating, La tahzan inna Allaha ma'ana. See, again, huzn is noted over here, that huzn he had eliminated because he knew Allah will not leave him alone. And we know examples of Hazrat Ibrahim as well, and of course, other messengers of Allah in the Quran. Finally, verse 1065 are efforts on the path of pure Quran in relation to the system of Deen. And this is something very interesting. Tolu Islam has to face the onslaught of such labels which are levied on it to distract people from the path of the pure Quran. Who are they hurting? With each false accusation, they themselves move away from the Quran. As a result, this is causing delay in getting Allah's help for the system of Deen. I will not go into finer details, but we can see the evidence of it that all those people who have opposed Tolu Islam, its pure Quranic stance for the system of Deen, where do they stand? Their suffering has increased and they have done great damage to themselves because they have moved away from the path of Allah. And they are now finding it impossible to come to the Quran. They simply cannot think of the pure Quran providing them that guidance because they have created that hell which the Quran has pointed to themselves with their own hands. And Tolu Islam is absolutely clear on this path that the system of Deen, what it is, and that we can get Allah's help if we follow this path. Even those who claim to be Muslims and study the Quran, when they are unable to perceive the Quran presenting the outline of the system of Deen and do not agree with the stance taken by Tolu Islam in this regard, they also oppose Tolu Islam, and all their efforts according to the Quran fall under the domain of this verse. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضٍ فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. That if you follow part of the Quran and do kufr, denial, rejection of part of it, then what will you get? You will get humiliation and ruin and devastation in this life. And we can read the rest of the verse from the Quran. We can see the evidence for this in that they continue to stay far away from the system of Deen despite continuously talking about Quran and Sunnah. I put it in inverted commas, and we all know what it means, which is blatant shirk according to the Quranic formula. They all support democracy as a way to gain power, which is really to please the West and seek its approval. Keep trying it, you'll never succeed. Tolu Islam is pursuing this path of pure Quran using the criterion of the Book of Allah, and this is the path of Hizbullah as stated in 58:22. If we remember, we have gone through this aspect that Quran classifies broadly human beings into two categories. Hizbullah, those who are defined by the Quran, and Hizb Shaitan, who follow their own desires. And it includes shirk as well. And if we are not on Hizbullah, then we are part of the other category and will never be distracted by anyone or by any other ism. The books by Allama Pervez have described all the relevant aspects of the system of Deen, and mankind will have to come to the Quran at some point in time in order to make sense of their life in this world. As long as they stay away from the system of Deen, there is going to be no peace and freedom from fear and grief in the world. And thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.